Welcome to the Cryptozoology Show with your host, the Cryptozoologist. Long time no see, you're here. But you wouldn't believe what happened to me. Last spring, I was out on a great carp season, already starting over 300, and working away at different species as they were coming along. And I kept feeling sick for a long time and couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, different places going. And it ended up I had this giant, sort of huge thing inside me, man, inside my chest. As this most insane experience that you could possibly imagine. They botched the first operation, two operations in a row in less than barely a week here, and they're not supposed to usually do that sort of thing. And so it was life-threatening, sort of wild stuff. But anyways, I survived through it. so anyways, finally getting enough energy here to finally do one of these shows again, sort of thing like that. But it was an amazing, sort of crazy experience in a lot of ways, and I'm still going through it. But I mean, it's a lot better than what I was. And that sort of thing like that. I had some amazing nurses and doctors and things. I had this hilarious nurse, Jen, and I mean, this lady just killed me. She didn't mean to kill me of laughter, and she was super professional, and I would hire her as my own personal nurse if I had to get. But I mean, she was extremely funny without meaning to be funny. Sort of, as I was all wasted out on this sort of morphine-like sort of stuff, right? And in this ward, all these the nurse who goes around and talks to them, and most of them are kazooed on something or other, right? So she comes in and she goes, "Hi, my name's Jennifer, and I'm going to be your nurse today." And then about 2 minutes later, somebody near me rang, and she got confused and thought it was me that was ringing. So she ran and comes back, and then she says, "Hi, my name's Jennifer, I'm going to be here." She would do this 10, 20 times a day, man, because like she thinks that every person that she would go into the different rooms that they're so wasted that they don't remember even like 2 minutes before. Right? Like so true. It was hilarious. Anyways, I fully enjoyed it. So a great nurse, very attentive and that sort of, but kind of entertaining that way, right? Like so. But this show here, and I had like I mentioned these books numerous times and different things. And we had one editor couldn't do it anymore. Another one passed on. So now we got a new one, a younger one, that claims that they actually have 5 minutes to do this and claims that they're not going to die anytime soon. so maybe finally these things will be getting done here, and my health is returning slowly but surely here, sort of thing like that, from barely being able to walk to now I can do a lot more sort of things, right? So it was a wild experience. But anyways, I'm at least free of this sort of nemesis for the moment. Anyway, and thanks for all the any new subscribers there. I see some Bigfoot sort of groups have joined in. And so when I say you guys, I'm not talking about the people listening to my show or people that are whatever, just happen to catch it or that sort of thing like that. When I say you guys, it just means like the science community in general and skeptics in general, with some of the bizarre sort of explanations they give that they actually believe is viable, right? Right? Sort of thing like that. And it's not, right? I mean, some of these things are silly, like, to suggest that tens of thousands of sightings over a 6,000-year period by random people all over the place, that each one can specifically always get the monster correctly, his body frame and shape, his behaviors and everything. This doesn't occur that way. If you ask 100 people to get in a room and say, "What's a jibbity bobbity boop?" Okay, like, because none of these people would have known what any of these things could be. They didn't have, the National Enquirer or a Bigfoot show on YouTube to see, right? So they had no reference of these sorts of things. So when you analyze that, and also fossil footprints and all kinds of other things, I mean, it's not feasible that all this was imagination, right? And that sort of thing like that. So what I'm going to do is talk about. I had never talked really about much about some of my Sasquatch hunts and things like that out in BC, Alberta, Northwest Territories, up towards that sort of range, and people that I interviewed from Alaska and different things like that. And we'll cover a bunch of different sort of things as well. I apologize in the past there. I realized too that because I was freezing, my brain was freezing all the time in pain, wondering. And so you kind of lose focus of what you're doing and different things like that. So on a lot of these shows, I was actually, really sick from these things, not realizing how this was occurring, and it would freeze your mind, and you'd get really weak and all kinds of things like that. And I mean, so even recovering, you get like this, right? But anyways, uh, what I wanted to talk about this time was different sightings that have never been published out there before. We're also going to talk about little known cryptids from the mugwump and the Britannia Bay monster. Different sections of the Ottawa River. I seen a show recently about some. I like this fellow. I've seen in some of his shows. He does a very good job. He's one of these kind of like he's kind of a guy that he likes reading like myself, ancient sort of old Canadiana books and different weird stories that you'll run across and all that sort of things. So he does a lot of Canadiana like things. And one of these shows was about some kind of alligators in the Ottawa River. And I'm familiar with that old story about an alligator being found in the Ottawa River, but the sightings are below about zero of alligator like sort of things in there. I collected these stories from the 60s, interviewed a lot of people, seen anomalies in the Ottawa River a fair amount of times over the years that I have no explanation for, except for a few that I believe were a seal to some kind of dolphin-like animal in one occasion, or a small white whale of some sort that got in there. Sharks, different things, but the Ottawa River, the older version of it in the earlier sort of times, and I was with two other people that we did see something that would more match this kind of thing, but serpent-like sort of ones, right? Very thick, about the size of a pole, sort of thing like that. An eel to serpent-like sort of dragonish head, and sort of 20, 30 feet long. That's the main monster of the Ottawa River, of a cryptic kind. The rest are actually just wayward visitors and sorts of things like that. So we'll discuss more about that. The possibly extinct Charleston Lake Brontosaurus monster, and we'll also talk about the mugwump, because on this show they propose that the mugwump is an alligator, possibly up in Lake Temiskaming, and that, which is an upper section of the Ottawa River. But no, it's not. I'm a personal witness of it, and I was with another fellow, and another fellow that actually would visit this ice fishing place too. Also saw, we all saw separately at different occasions, and once with this fellow. I saw all of us both. I was only 3 feet from this thing. I was out night fishing, and so we'll talk about that later. I'll tell you exactly what the two creatures are of the mugwump, and there, as far as I know, there isn't any third one, and that sort of thing like that. So I'll just clear up some, because sometimes people have these mystery shows where it actually isn't really like the things on it really have no sort of bearing to the sort of area, right? It's just that it could be it's like the Muskrat Lake monster. Mr. Bradley had written this book about that, and he proposed it was a telemonstrum, and that I filmed the two of them in the lake. I know exactly what they were. They were Moringa leonina, or a sort of one like that, or a similar, gray seal, elephant seal, something in that sort of range, right? and that sort of thing like that. We'll discuss about that and some other sort of things there. So it's BC Bigfoot hunting. We're going to talk about a smaller Sasquatch-like variety as well. We're going to talk about some other weird things, just mixed in little bits of hodgepodges of all sorts of things here. Now, here a lot of people don't have any idea of how much giant space there really is of untouched wilderness in sort of BC, Alberta, Northwest Territories, Saskatchewan, even Quebec, Ontario. I mean, all these sort of forests keep going, right? People mistake this that they're using a scientific guy that just made out a geographical map, and in his imagination and the country's imagination, the forest now has changed, but it really hasn't. It's the same forest. So any creatures can easily meander these things because there's zillions of acreage of no roads, no anything. And people have this mistake of this, that they believe that because they've traversed out in the wilderness, they took roads to get to a certain point. Then they had to hitchhike in on pathways that were already grooved out hundreds of years ago, most of them, right? So people have this weird sort of mentality about that they sort of think that it's all been explored and these kinds of things like that. This isn't the case at all. Like, I mean, not even in the remotest sort of thing. We'll cover some of that, and I'll show you all different BC areas. You'll see some nice pictures and different sightings that have never been reported before and different things like that. Hey, here's my buddy, the big Mr. Ram there. Sort of thing. And these mountain goats are astonishing, man. They can run up right up straight mountains. Like one's way more like this one's on a downcline, sir. So you can kind of like the creature or even a human would be able to traverse that somewhat going up, right? Because it's on sort of an angle like that. But some of them that they can do is astonishing. It's like right flat, and there's these micro little crevices, and somehow these dudes can fly up these things. I watched like about 20 of them going up this mountain, and I couldn't believe that they could do. I couldn't believe. it was astonishing. So I'm going to show like people that even been to BC, maybe you've just been to Vancouver and something, and you don't really, you're not sort of grasping how incredibly much of a forest untouched and sort of that it is extremely easy and understandable why anybody from feral humans to Bigfoot to all kinds of other sorts of things. The same with the lakes. The lakes are titanic. I disagree with most experts. Most lakes do not actually have a denizen of the deep living there year round most of the time. A lot of these lakes actually are just where the creatures get in through underground caving systems, river systems that reach the lake, and they crawl over some little patch of land at night, weird things like that, and get in the body of water. And, lake monsters, if you ever watch my Loch Ness show, it completely really explains to you a vast majority of what's really going on. So I don't know why people argue about this. This is fact. I could prove any of these things, like, easily. Just go, if I was in a jury thing and showed you ancient historic records for a gazillion years, then all these sorts of things and that scientific sort of underground sort of streams that have been found that are near these areas and all kinds of things, it all adds up that it's very simple that lake monsters, a lot of them are actually just visitors, wayward creatures that a lot of times are known by science, but sometimes they're not. And so that's because a lot of them got from the ocean, and even the odd place where they are trapped in there, they might have gotten in there originally from there, so they might not have been in there millions of years as people think, and these kinds of things, right? So keep that in mind. There's a lot more to it than what people just make as some basic thing. And the same thing with the silly things about, Ogopogo copying from the Loch Ness Monster or all these different lakes. Most of them were around before the Loch Ness Monster. People need to understand that. These stories were around sometimes hundreds of years before the Loch Ness Monster. The only mention of the Loch Ness Monster is from one saint, 1600s, certain thing. And this that one thing, and that was actually on the River Ness, not on Loch Ness at all. So it wasn't even in the same body of water, right? So not until way in the 1800s, a few sort of weird things, and then not until really the roads got around there, and papers were looking for romanticism and everything. So they all started focusing on the Loch Ness Monster. Don't bother with the 20 zillion other lake monsters, because that was what was hitting the news, right? And a few people of notoriety had actually claimed to have seen these things. So this all compiled to making this sort of, yeah, you know what I mean, such a belief in that Nessie must have been transported over here or there. All these things are foolishness, right? Nessie's a copy of actually most other lake monster lakes around the world. Some are so old, like over in Sweden, you have somewhere they even have on their a coat of arms, like from the 11th, 10th century, different ones in the places like that, an actual water monster as their sort of coat of arms, right? Like, I mean, you know, so like, I mean, seriously, like all these things were around way before. So the same thing with the Sasquatch phenomena and this sort of thing like that. As I'd mentioned in other shows, I mean, you can find from 1,000, 2,000 plus years ago in Europe and different ones, these woodwose and all these kinds of things that are identical to our Sasquatch, same behaviors, same as a wild human, right? And so the English didn't copy off the Americans here. These stories were around way before any American ever set soil on the United States. The only people that can match them is the natives of Canada and the United States that had a Sasquatch-like creature around. Those guys, some of them are thousands of years as well, right? So, but besides that, they certainly didn't copy off of each other. And wild man has been, you know, because they're wild humans. That's what I'm telling you in a lot of cases. And because humans can be anywhere, right? Well, then the Sasquatch phenomena can be anywhere. And as I showed you in other shows, you can have hypertrichosis on even islands and all kinds of weird things. So it can appear anywhere in humans all over the world. And so this is probably, and if you have giantism in the family, let's say 4 or 5 guys are over, I don't know, 6'10" or something, and they're all monsters, right? These things have happened to different sort of groups, right? And now you got a little family unit. They go out, they get some young ladies in the village. All of a sudden, you got the Brady Bunch going, right? That's enough to keep the legend going for another 100 or 200 years, right? And that sort of thing like that. And some of them would take these genes and these different things, right? So it's a mixture of a bunch of things here, from wild escaped monkeys, gorillas, possibly a native North American ape, unknown or two, and wild humans here of different varieties. Some have little primitive sort of things, tools. Others aren't as advanced and just walk around barefoot all the time. So there's different variants of even these, right, from different reasonings. Like I said, if you had a lady that was a native woman that's trapped, right? She gets kidnapped by a Sasquatch. She may teach the child, if she's lucky enough to survive through the whole thing, some kind of her language a little bit at first, because that's when you have to teach children, a monkey, anything at all. The earlier you could get with their brains like a sponge, the more success rate you're likely going to have. And so it's very likely that the parent, even if the mother is sort of terrorized by this Bigfoot guy, she might still have motherly sort of things, and she might, you know, have taught in some of them some kind of primitive like language a little bit. And then the Bigfoot guy is also going to understand his father, the grunts and the ooh, ooh, ooh. So you kind of would get like things like that. It's feasible, really, actually, tell you the truth. So then maybe the next group, if one of them died or something and the guy didn't teach the language back again, right? Well, now the guy's going to go back to the ooh, ooh, ooh stuff. It wouldn't be long, his children, right? Sort of idea like that. So, anyways, we got some different things here to cover, but it's nice to be back. My head isn't freezing as much and that sort of thing like that. So, anyways, we'll continue on here. So, but here, as you can see, like here was some river that I was fishing, right, and that sort of thing like that. Look at the shadow pyramid in the center. Okay, you can see there's like almost like a tree-like pyramid-like shape of this shadowy thing right in the center of these two trees, right? So let's say I'm fishing here. There could be a gang of 10 Sasquatch standing behind these trees. You think I'm going to see them? I mean, seriously. So the only way that you're going to see them is if they want you to see them, or they don't care that you see them, or that the stench, the wind would blow it to you, or something, some kind of crack on the ground, maybe if the guy stepped on something weird, but whatever, but that'd be about it. That'd be the only way that you would ever see these, or if you had a pet dog or something, right? But otherwise, you wouldn't sort of have a clue that anybody would be there, right? And this is just off of a road. You see what I mean? Like, and there's literally millions of square acres here in each sort of a section, sometimes of massive, massive amounts here. And a lot of people, because scientists, they'll say, oh, this forest and this and, that sort of thing, right? But I mean, the reality is that, sorry about that, there was something stuck on the screen here. I was trying to see this Juneau Lusk area. The reality is that if you notice, tons of Bigfoot reports for hundreds of years all through the Alaskan belt. Well, look, it's right beside BC area. Just you crawl over 2 feet, and then if you go up this way, then you got sort of Russia and all these sorts of stuff. So each area would be extremely feasible for even smaller populations here. Bigfoot isn't as common as we think. That some of these are actually wild people that would migrate in different areas depending on the season, berries and different food system things that they want. Like I collected all kinds of stories of Sasquatch swimming out to these bizarre islands, all out in Alaska to British Columbia and different places, right? Even out in Ontario and Quebec, sort of thing like that. So these things occur seemingly, and because pretty well a vast majority of species can't swim, again, this correlates more likely that a lot of times they are actually some kind of race of giant wild humans in the real kind, the Bigfootish sorts that we see, the monsters. And then there's feral people and other things sort of mixed into these, right? But Alberta, the same, Saskatchewan, all these sorts of provinces, really the belts of forests could easily keep going, right? And this sort of thing like that. Now, I should be the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's youngest and first on their own accord, not because some parent told me to do it, not anything. I wanted to become a professional fisherman and hunt lake monsters. So I started collecting lake monster stories from my family at 2 years of age, and here I'm going to be going after the Tucalata monster and this sort of thing like that. So I've been around chasing all kinds of things all over the place, and was doing things way before, like at super young age, but because I was able to read at such a high level and get the comprehension of what these things are meaning, and extremely curious about sort of these things, because seeing it in your parents and family and knowing these people wouldn't lie under any circumstances on this planet, even if you offered them $10 million, they wouldn't. And they're telling you that they saw a lake monster or a giant snake monster, then there's got to be something to it, right? Like I knew before my first sort of anything that I had ever seen, that these had to be based on some kind of reality. Then going through researching of zillions of old newspaper accounts and ancient books and libraries all over the place, and seeing this consistency, I had no other choice but to start to sort of follow this sort of pathway, right? Sort of thing like that. So, but anyways, the Charleston Lake Monster was the first one that I investigated. Certain we'll talk about him after and that sort of thing like that. But I interviewed two people that saw the Tucalata monster. One, when it was still alive, had still the horn in it. The other one, he didn't. It was dead at that point, and they were already getting ready to start to chop it up. But it wasn't as bad off as what you see in the photograph. And both of these people laugh at the idea that it could have been a whale. I mean, both of them. The guy said he walked way down, and this eyeball was to him like about half the size of him, for crying out loud. So these things are silly, like that somebody's suggesting it was a pilot whale or anything. The thing weighed massive tons. Just his head and neck that was weighed. They didn't even weigh the whole creature, right? And these pilot and minke whales and different ones are massively smaller. They don't have gigantic sort of spiky scales on them. They don't grow hair. They don't have a 1-ton horn growing out of their head. They don't have teeth like that. They don't have dragon scales. The list goes on and on. So anyways, I talked to a person that actually seen them while they were still alive, right? And the guy he had good knowledge of the whole thing. He had walked up and down it, kept looking at it, and he was totally fascinated. And the thing kept wriggling its tail and things like that, but a portion of it was chopped off. But it was like 83 feet that they had measured, right? So I mean, so I've been after these kinds of things a long time. I fished hundreds of lake monster lakes and that sort of things, and investigated thousands actually across sort of, and got stories from Europe and all over the place like that. So, whenever the senator gets around these young people and different things like that, you'll see. I even have a special section, tales from across the seas and sort of things like that, of people that sent me in everything from Mokili Mbembe to all kinds of different ones that have never been published or seen before. So anyways, stay tuned for that and that sort of thing like that. But here, as you can see, I'm just stopping off, and I started doing this. I started stopping off on the side of the road because I had this theory, and I was correct about this. Okay, can you imagine if, let's say I was with you guys, let's say there's 10 of us and we're standing here, right? Okay, and now let's go looking for Bigfoot, okay? Do you really believe, even in this little section, that with us making noise, dropping through the ground, can barely maneuver through these kinds of things, there's no roads there, there's no anything, that we're going to be able to, the creature's going to hear you, they're going to smell you, they're going to all kinds of things. This is why these expeditions are useless, but in a lot of ways, because the people, especially, this is, if you were going to do it, you'd be better off here than actually in a roaded one. The roaded ones, if these wild humans, Bigfoot, ape men are real, right? Well, then they know about roads by now. They've seen, they would have seen humans going past them. They know when to cross them early in the morning, late at night, that sort of thing like that, so they're not often seen, and that sort of thing like that. But where they probably live, where people aren't realizing this, is just off to the left or right of you on any highways going. There's bazillions of acres of forest that nobody would ever go into. No person's going to be driving along the side of the highway, park their car there, and decide to go camping for 3 days out in a ditch on the side of a highway road. They're going to go way out in more into a roaded sort of area, and then where you can't go any further, now you're way out in your imagination in the middle of the forest. Now you're going to go from there, but this is where everybody goes and logs. The natives go there for hunting, different kinds of things. So a place like that actually gets way more traffic, right? And these sorts of things here, like here, the 100 Mile House incident, I interviewed three natives from there with Christian names, Bob, Susan, and Bill, in the late '70s here, and but they were they left a reservation there, and they were berry picking somewhere near this reserve, and they heard this baby cry. Then they started to go look through the berry patches, and one remembered the tribal elders had warned not to go to this and could be a wild man trying to capture the woman. So Bob, the oldest, warned Susan not to go any further. They then decided to vacate, and going back, they heard huge crunching in bushes. Then they saw a tall, hairy man, at least about 10 feet tall, full red fur, like long and scraggly fur, very bushy, gnarly. Susan kept repeating that, like she couldn't believe how. She said it was reminded her of like big piles of wool all messed up and sort of like weird, right? Like that sort of thing, like that. And anyways, this creature had howled at them, so they panicked and they started bolting in reverse, like staring at him, sort of, but like trying to run sideways and sort of keep looking at him back and forth, sort of thing, like that, right? Interestingly, they said they had stopped the habit of berry picking and decided they liked the bars a little bit better, sort of thing like that. So I bought them around, and I was very appreciative for the story. I went around to a lot of people around the 100 Mile House area, and I had a couple others that sort of yeah, didn't want to talk about their story, but admitted that they I'd ran across something unusual, but this was the only ones that I could get to actually do it, right? But so it was an interesting experience, but these people were quite serious. I fully believe that they, saw what they saw, sort of thing like that, right? The Kelowna sighting, not only did I see Ogopogo, and also I saw something weird in Lake Shuswap and Hook, something weird in Lake Shuswap. But anyways, we'll talk about that later. But I also witnessed with three people a giant rumped, fully red, thick fur sort of looked like a human. The guy bent over and he was scooping with his hand, and he had real big long arms. We all seen him at the side. I mean, it could have been a female because I mean the rump on this thing was titanic. It was huge, but it had like crunched down big still legs that looked much more human to me, and all three of us in the car, we only seen this for a split like 3 4 seconds. It was in between these two trees on a road heading towards Kelowna. I think we got to Kelowna about 5 10 minutes later, so it wasn't far from Kelowna. Don't know the name of the stream, but it was in between these two set of trees, and still to this date, even them, they kind of almost, because neither the other people, they didn't really believe below zero in a Bigfoot like phenomena, right? But all of us really did wonder. I mean, the guy looked like, or her, it looked like it had no neck, and he looked like he had a head like a human, except like pointy, right? Sort of like, but wide, like super wide and super wide shoulders. But the rump was really big. That's all I can say, right? Like, so I don't know. Besides my run in with that convinces me more, because I mean I heard this thing screaming, I saw the branches, I smelled them, I seen where he might have been even laying down or went for a dump in the bush. And I seen my buddy's black eye. I seen the stuff all stuck in his clothing. I saw a lot of things, and there's no other explanation that it had to be a wild man, because no human could scream like that. No, not any regular one. And I did see a Bigfootish, like sort of little fellow in the 70s area at the Kickapoo Creek, but I still don't know. I mean, that could have been a wayward monkey, somebody's gorilla escape. I have no idea, right? Like, but I mean, so I can't say that was Bigfoot. But this thing, whatever, right? And I found footprints in Florida and in Ontario and in Quebec of weird sort of Bigfootish like sort of things, and been sent some and held the Bossberg cripple print and different things, right? So I've looked at it up as sort of things, but the thing is that it was only for about 4 seconds, so it's not proof enough even to me to say 100% sure that I did see Sasquatch. But a lady I used to go out with told me about a relative she had who had seen around Prince George region while fishing, trolling a Sasquatch along the shores, seemingly looking for shellfish of some sort. I got to meet him finally in the 90s, and he had saw this back in the later 70s. He thought it might have been 7 to 8 feet tall because it was not straight up standing. It was kind of leaned over looking for whatever, shellfish or something. And it was fully black furred, big pointed head, seemingly little to no neck whatsoever that he could notice, and it was like quite wide, right? Sort of thing like that. But the thing looked at him, sort of turned around and went back in the forest. It only happened seconds, and that was it, right? And this might have been like 78 or 79, you think, somewhere in there, right? Barkerville Beast, the boomtown in 1800s made many rich. An old prospector with his tribal woman was prospecting near it in the 1950s, and a wild man came around their tent and stole their dried smoked fish that they had. So it's amazing how many Sasquatch like these dried smoked fish, barreled fish, that sort of thing, right? So good bait. Now, the Cherry Creek sighting, I'm an actual part of this sort of bizarre Cherry Creek sort of story here. And I had some good laughs in the sort of area around Ogopogo, sort of land on the beaches and stuff, asking people all over the place, did they see Ogopogo and things like that. But I did run across not too many of that sort, but Sheila was my best witness, her and her boyfriend. But and I got a couple others that were a bit less descriptive because they didn't really see it long enough to really know what they had really ran across here, right? But they just knew it was way bigger than anything that should be in the lake, right? Sort of thing like that. But this guy says, this hairy Bigfoot hermit guy, Bigfoot's real. He was naked. He stole my gold nuggets. He stole my gold nuggets. And I'm going on. And so, what are you talking about, right? So he said he was down at this place called Cherry Creek, right? And he was working some trough, and he had found this sort of big gold nugget. And so he was looking at it, and all of a sudden he heard like scuffling, and he turns, and this guy that was fully naked, kind of furry, sort of Bigfoot-like guy with a beard that looked like some old kind of hermit miner like sort of guy, right? Came running out of nowhere and grabbed the gold nugget out of his hand and then bolted for some barn sort of thing and then walked it on him. so the guy said that Bigfoot is not really like Bigfoot. It's actually some kind of wild hairy hermit that lives out in the woods, right? So this is what his explanation was. So I was loving this. I thought, hey, this sounds fantastic. I got to see this. So I decided to go down to this Cherry Creek, and when I get there, there's a pile of tourists there, and they wanted to go gold panning and that sort of thing. So anyways, I joined this group and that sort of thing like this, and this guy's dressed like Herb Tarlick, and he's trying to con us into buying gold pans and this and that and all kinds of stuff. So I thought it was some kind of scammy gambit of some sort where they probably put like fake gold in the thing, like something like that, right? That's what was going on in my mind. So I actually found this 4-gram nugget. And so I said, oh my goodness, and this guy had disappeared, and I had noticed that he had went in some sort of building that was off to the right of me, right? So I said, I wondered in my mind, I said, what if this scammy guy, like if I got this gold chunk, is he like, do they detect you later and say, hey, you better give us this or whatever, right? Like I believe anything when it comes to tourist traps, right? So I'm concerned that this guy's gonna, so I just wanted to ask if you could actually keep the gold or that you find and this sort of thing, right? So anyways, so I'm walking along and I hammer on the door where I'd seen him go in and nobody's there. They wouldn't answer. So then I started walking along the side of the building and I'm looking through the window and all of a sudden there's this nude dude there and he was pretty furry. Only some of those guys from the Middle East area seen out at discos in the 70s was more furry than that. But anyways, in this sort of range, big footage for sure. This guy, he was putting on this fake beard, and it was the Herb Tarlick guy.
So then I said, oh my goodness. So I sort of ducked and I took off and I sort of went back. And so this guy comes out and he starts going up to people in their troughs and asking them if they found any gold. And he's actually in these overalls now, right? So, but with this fake beard and sort of the whole do. And he said, I'm a miner, and he's going around and stuff like this. So this one guy says, is this real gold? And it actually was a gold chunk, and it was a great big chunk. I don't know how many grams, but I'm guessing like 8-10 grams maybe on this thing. And it was a big chunk. And this guy, he said to him, he said, hey, that's, he said, no. He said, that's pyrite. He said, it's worthless. He said, but I could use it for my exhibit. We rarely get it. And he grabs it out of his hand and put it in his pocket, right? So he kept, so then I decided to not tell him that I had found gold whatsoever, right? So anyways, I think I've solved the mystery of the sort of Cherry Creek Sasquatch. It's actually just this guy, so maybe like when the time when he went, maybe he was by himself, and maybe this guy was getting change and then saw him pull out the big chunk of gold through the window or something and decided to maybe figure because the guy was drunk that he could scare him off or something, right, and get his gold. So craziest thing I've never ever seen, like in some kind of ways, right? Like, because I mean, it's kind of funny that a guy gets in these, to pretend he's a hairy miner to scare you off so he can get your gold, right? I mean, pretty weird. So, if you're down Cherry Creek way there, you can go check out the naked hermit guy. So, but I mean, I couldn't stop laughing, right? I just thought it was the most ridiculous sort of like, but I mean, the guy was actually he was telling the truth that he did really see a Bigfoot guy here. So this, what I'm saying is like even in a case like this guy's drunk with so many beers. A hairy hermit guy that's actually just a con artist that wants your gold is enough to make somebody believe that they're a Sasquatch. Right? So, like, I mean, it's feasible, these things, like I say, right? Like, because I've read across some of these odd sort of stories, right, where even the Bigfoot speaks a language or different things like that. So, a lot of times, like I said, some of these cases, it could be that they're actually more like of a feral sort of human being, right? The scream from hell, a witness named Sheila, a resident then of Kelowna, who I had interviewed in the 80s last time that had been out in BC at the time, saw with her boyfriend, Ogopogo. She also was with campers near Lake Shuswap, and they heard in the middle of the night these grunts and then howls that sounded like from hell, she said. And the way she was describing looking reminded me exactly of the guy from Aquio there, King Bigfoot. That's a good way of describing it. I mean, some of the terrifying shrillness to it and everything. I mean, it's enough to give you the literal like heebie-jeebies, right? Like I mean, so I believe she fully because her face was scared. Anyways, they had shined the flashlight where they heard the screaming, right? And they saw him, right? So they saw this big head, and they just panicked and bolted, right? So she's not even sure like what exactly, if he was black or dark or brown or whatever, but he was probably like a darker color sort of, right? Like it all happened so fast, right? She complained, she said, man, it wrecked our buzz. And, Canadians, we like our 2-4 and all that sort of thing, right? So she's getting right into her drinking action, right? And sadly, the Lake Shuswap Bigfoot was out to get her, right? Sort of thing. And so she had seen that in like 1980, and the Ogopogo was actually the next year, right? So sort of thing like that in 81. The Alberta Glacier Beast near the town of Jasper, Alberta in 1967, a hiker named Ralph visited Alberta and was hiking up a glacier area near the town and saw ahead of him a huge black upright figure vanish on the other side of the glacier. He was not sure the height, however, seemed tall, but with seemingly had like really wide widths to him, like you could really see him well up there and that sort of thing like that.
BC has all kinds of things from char to steelhead and rainbows and all kinds of things like that. I mean, it's just amazing sort of fishing. So I always laugh when these skeptics say, well, the creature couldn't find any food. What a ridiculous. The streams are loaded full of trout year round of some sort. Some are just migratory going up it, but there's always some kind of, native stream like sort of fish that are usually in it as well, suckers and all kinds of things. There's moose that are over 2,000 pounds and giant bears and everything else that can have no problem eating. I suspect a wild monkey man wouldn't have much of a problem either, right? But anyways, a man named Anthony in 1986 was around Prince George fishing, and he went by a small island. And he saw, to his astonishment, a huge, nude, hairy, fat lady come onto the edge. And then she saw him and leaped in the water and started swimming like a breaststroke. And then the typical kind, just raise and lower your arms sort of thing. And he went nuts. He panicked. He said he never seen anything. So he was petrified that she was going to come in. He was pretty sure it was a girl because she had like big boobs on her, sort of thing like this, right? But anyways, so the guys are bolting, and then he seen her face, and she kind of just stopped and kind of went underwater and started swimming back towards the island. So maybe she wanted some love, sort of thing like that. So I always wonder that, like when you're out fishing, because I have another story about this that this happened to this person. It's hilarious. It's the only sort of super weird fishing Bigfoot one. That's a new sort of realm that I never ran across one of these stories before. I've heard of Bigfoot stealing people's fish and things, but this is at a slightly different sort of level. But just to stop the stories for 2 seconds, I just wanted to talk about the Skeptic's Corner here, the bear theory. Here I'm feeding a bear, and I also really wrestled a bear at the Ottawa Sportsman Show. I was teaching flasher, early LCD uses, flipping techniques, and one of the attractions was a Kodiak that I wrestled, and I was the first one to do it. Piles of people, they said, who wants to be the first one to do it? None of them would raise their hand, and so I did, and once I survived it, then all of a sudden these 6 foot, monsters, sort of characters started saying, whoa, yeah, he survived, I could do it. So a few others did it too, but the rest of them were much bigger sort of fellows, right, that had done it, and nobody could move that bear. Sort of thing like that. But anyways, so it's... when people say that this bear theory, that it's always a bear, I mean, it's a bit out there. Like, I mean, okay, you're looking at a screen at a blurrier old photo here, okay? Now, clearly, does anybody believe that that's Bigfoot? Right? Even though he's standing up, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't really look like a Bigfootish thing at all here. Like, I mean, look, the bear isn't barely even as wide as me, like that, right? Like, I mean, sort of thing. So, and I mean, this guy, when he'd stand up, he'd be, towards the sort of 6 foot range, I'd imagine, or something like that. I don't exactly know, because he was usually on his all fours, but he also liked to stand like that, and I could feed him and that sort of thing like that. But the thing is that most of them are too short to a lot of the sort of sightings. A lot of times, I mean, you don't, in almost no reports, get that the Bigfoot's face had big giant ears on him. You don't get pointed. So, I mean, you can see the werewolf ones being mistaken for a bear easier than a regular Bigfoot, simply because regular Bigfoot usually don't have ears like this, and they don't have that sort of muzzle, beaky like sort of thing in the front, right? So there's a lot of problems with that. Plus, they don't stand on their 2 legs for any length of time. even trained bears aren't going to do this all day, sort of thing like that, and especially a wild one, much rare occurrence of that happening, and especially for any length of time, where it would be like for a long period of time of that. So I mean, these kind of things, for a split second, if something furry moved through the bush for 2 inches and you really couldn't get a grasp of his face or any of these kinds of things, yeah, it could have been a bear. But I mean, a lot of times when I can clearly see if I didn't know that that was me there, and I wouldn't say, oh, I think that guy's feeding Bigfoot. I can clearly see that's a bear. So I mean, there's problems with these things, right? Also, there's all kinds of different sort of things where just a lot of them really, I mean, they're going to be leaving claw marks in the prints and these kinds of things. Piles of Sasquatch prints, never do you find these claw marks in them or things like that. So there's problems with that. And even when they overlap with each other here, and I'll show you the skeptic's corner here, sort of thing like that. Now, if you look here, this is almost an overlap here, okay, on the right. Now look at a typical sort of Bigfoot one here, okay? You can clearly see that the toes are much more uniform, right? And the big opposing to our big toe, right? Sort of thing like that. Whilst with the knees is much more elongated. There's always going to be these claws. So even if that print had a went and made it now into a bigger print, you're still going to have these claws. You're going to have claws in the center more area and then up in the front, right? And these sort of things. You don't see these in Sasquatch tracks like true ones where, even a qualified person's looked at them that as an expert on these kinds of tracks and knows this. Like here's another one where they're almost stepped into each other, right? So yeah, you can see now it would make it bigger. But I mean, look at the Bossberg cripple print as a for instance, right? You can see the more rounded, squarish sort of thing here like this. These aren't like that. I mean, the toes are sort of all sort of more elongated, the nails and everything like that. So no matter what, you're still going to have these sort of things like that. Like here's you can see now this one I believe probably is an authentic Sasquatch track for another reason. If you notice the different wearings on each toe when the creature bent in, and that on this toe, his toe has a little ingrown sort of a nail here where the nail's sort of a little bit more pointier, that just particular one, and it grows off to the far sort of right, because in that spot he doesn't wear it down as much probably, or that it just grows funnier there and start growing out to the side, right? But the thing is that here in a normal bear print, you can clearly see the difference here. I mean, there's a lot of difference here in how the narrows it out. And the more back of the print, you never see this in these Sasquatch tracks. They're much more wider. So even if he stepped in a double print, then the back part is still not going to be wide like that, like not the same, right? And that sort of thing like that. So there is definitely these problems, right? Another thing skeptics say is, where could they hide, right? Here's just off the side of the road. Now look, this is just a billionth blob of 1 billion blobs out there of giant forests. Now really, if there was a Sasquatch in behind me, right, and look at these trees here, if I turn sideways, do you think you're really going to see me? Right? Now, if there was a Bigfoot that was up in these trees up behind me, are we going to see him? No, we can't see nothing there. And people don't get this. They sort of have this imagination that sort of like it's all, you know what I mean, a pathway here. There's only like a half a mile of forest. Now it's another pathway. It's all been done. Everything's been seen. It's not the case, right? not even close, right? And these aren't even monsters. I went through one in California that you could drive through, right? So, I mean, these things are crazy, like where people have this kind of a strange sort of as thought process when they're city folk of that, it's all been explored, right? But this isn't the case. In Chilliwack in 1971, Debbie, a native, her Christian name, had a horrific encounter near Chilliwack Logging Road Going to meet her BF. At the time, she saw a giant covered, black fur covered man with thick long hair and with two strides seemingly cross the road and vanish at least 12 feet. He was at least about 12 feet tall, slimmer, and lower waist area. So it was weird. She said like he was like big, sort of barrel chest up at the top. And that sort of thing, but the guy had a really skinny sort of lower section, like as if he was hungry or something, right? Like maybe lacking in food or whatever, right? A very skinny lower section. So interesting, but I love this one here. A man fishing in holes where trout get stuck in after spring, after floods. You'll see on these like little pathway roads or different things like that, trout actually stuck in these little pools. And they'll sit there all summer long and they can survive through the thing because bugs and different things, a frog will flop by, different things like that. And it's enough. So people will go fishing. I did it. It was fantastic. It was the most thrilling, coolest thing, right, ever. But anyways, this guy, this is hilarious. He was fishing up someplace near Kamloops. I forgot to put that in. But anyways, this man, he was fishing near Kamloops someplace, and he was fishing these holes. And so he chucks it in there, right? So he gets this yank on his fly, right? And so he starts lifting it up. There was this little group of trees that was right beside the sort of pool, right? That he couldn't really see behind the trees or anything like that. It was a thick, bushy sort of tree. And this Bigfoot leaped right out and screamed at the guy, and then he grabbed onto the guy's throat and started running. So the guy panicked and freaked out, dropped his fishing rod, and all he seen was his fishing rod and the line and everything vanish in between the trees and go away. so I love this. I like the idea of that. So a fly rod stealing Sasquatch, right? So it was great stuff. So I've heard of like native guys having their fish stolen and different a fisherman or two, these kinds of stories, but I never got one where the Bigfoot actually stole his rod, right? So the best is right up there with my beer stealing Bigfoot and some of the other ones I've collected over the ages, but I totally love this one. So great stuff, but so it's very interesting how it works. Like, I mean, some of the crazy things that has not happened in the world of the Bigfoot, right? The Cold Lake Monster, I interviewed a man fishing on Cold Lake, Alberta, that in 1968, he had saw a Bigfoot looking down at him, who screamed when he let a trout go. so seemingly the Sasquatch wasn't a fan of catch and release, right? So I guess I would have been in trouble with him too, right? But he also hooked some giant fish in there as well, and so have I. And I saw some other strange sort of wave-like sort of thing in that lake. Another time I fished in there twice, and it was absolutely beautiful. But there's definitely some monster, probably sturgeon or this sort of thing. There's some kind of water big animal, fish, whatever it is. It's hard to know, right? But there's this guy had his line like stripped right out completely. So did I, and sort of in this place, and it's interesting. There's some odd little stories over the ages, right, of this lake having a lake monster in it, right? But I mean, I didn't see anything descriptive enough to make a decision on what possibly it could be, right? Sort of thing like that. But here's an interesting case that never's probably appeared on 411 or any of those, but I knew the family and that sort of thing, but this family in the 70s, this guy named Jacques, a French fellow, he had vanished near Jasper, Alberta after a hike in the mid-70s. And then piles looked for him and he was never found. Now, what was really odd is oddly, they did find traces where he was, and they had found these large tracks. One of the people, the volunteers, had reported to the family later, but they never, the person at the time when they got this information, they didn't really, they were thinking like bear and that, but the person never really said what they were, right? Or even so they just said there was these huge tracks around where the guy had vanished, right? So I mean, you would think that I always wondered this. Like, you would think when the person, like, normally, especially volunteers, that means they're local. They should be familiar with bears and things. Why were they not specific about it? Right? Like, that's sort of weird. Like, normally you would have said, well, if it was a bear tracks, right, then you would think that a giant bear got porridge out, right? So you would have said that, but why didn't they, right? So the family never correlated it at the time, but I always wonder, like, I mean, sort of, and this is ages ago, way before this 411 stuff started on the internet or any of these kinds of things, right? But I just always wondered at the time, was it possibly a Bigfoot that sort of grabbed him, right? Or Mrs. Bigfoot, right? Sort of thing like that. Uh, Here, Lake Shuswap Beast, two first-hand accounts that were witnessed by Steve and Michael on Lake Shuswap. In 1974, they saw a giant sturgeon go past their canoe, and then a 40-foot large sailboat was just a bit longer than the sailboat, the sturgeon. I mean, this is epic, Titanic size. This is like double of these super monster stories that you usually get, right? Sort of things like that. I interviewed an old sort of guy that would take care of the booms and that sort of thing on the Otter River. And he has ran across the sturgeon that was over longer than one of these huge booms that was there, that was over 25 feet long. A sort of thing like that. But that's a freshwater monster, same with Lake Ponkamook. The sturgeon's supposed to be 25 foot plus on him and this sort of thing, but 40 foot, wow, wow, wow. Right, this sort of thing like that. But besides that, the natives around there report a different sort of a Bigfoot like sort of a guy. There's two kinds. There's your regular sort of Bigfoot, right? Well, which the Stephen guy, on a separate occurrence, he was paddling out in the mid '60s out on that lake, and he had saw along the shoreline a large hairy nude man climb out of the lake and go into the forest onto an island, and he dared not follow it and kept paddling. And this is so many of these where these Bigfoot have been seen swimming to an island or coming back from one. It's fascinating there, right? But I mean, the Shuswap area is very interesting. But there's natives that I was talking to a few around there that had stories of this Tazama, right? And Tazama is different than the giant sturgeon phenomenon in the lake too. So yes, there is a lake monster in there no matter what. Tazama, I never got like a very great descriptive what this thing could be, but he's like an alligator sort of big monster of some sort, right? Like plesiosaurian alligatory sort of head to him, and longer neck, and some were shorter versions. So it's hard to know, right? And it seems that that kind of monster is less seen in more modern times than in old times, right? So as far as I know, it could even be extinct. That it's hard to get natives to all the time to get proper sort of they just don't go sharing with everybody down the street sort of thing, right? Like, and that sort of thing like that. But nevertheless, there's definitely there's this other sort of ape that lives there. And what's weird about them, I can't pronounce their name. I always had trouble with the name, so I'm just going to leave it alone. But anyways, what he is he's like a Bigfoot entity, furry area, that sort of thing. And he lives on the side of mountains, usually like where he'll dig like a little tunnel. So he's sort of weird, like he's different than the regular Bigfoot, even in his living habits is slightly different. He seems to like on the edges of sort of like a valley like thing, anywhere where there's a hill going up, and he'll create some kind of cave or tunnel like sort of thing, or he takes over one from somebody else and digs it out, whatever the case, right? Some kind of scenario like that. And apparently these guys aren't that tall, right? They can be anywhere from like 3 to about 5, 6 feet tall, maximum sort of idea, right? So interesting, right? Where you have a specific sort of Bigfootish like guy that's quite different from the typical ones, right? But also you have in the same area the regular sort of Bigfoot ones. Mystery big cats in the north, the rarely seen giant lion of Northwest Territories, Alaska. Besides wayward snow tigers and nunstriped lion white with a mane has been randomly reported for centuries from the Northwest Territories territories to Alaska, with children to adults said to have been eaten by them. And also you have the Nahanni Valley to Fraser as well, giant wolves, dire wolves like sort of things, and giant bears that are, Titanic size that can inhale you, and all kinds of other wacky sort of little Bigfoot creatures and big Bigfoot creatures, right? So that area has quite the sort of thing. But these cats are one of the white cats, he's identical pretty well to this guy, except he's white, right? And that sort of thing like that. And there's been some terrifying accounts. There was this old prospector. The guy actually was with this girl, and this giant white lion came out from behind this thing. But what's weird, though, is there was another account similar to that where the guy mentioned that it seemed to have some kind of little stripes on it or something like that. So that could have been a wayward Siberian tiger in that case. But several of these where the children or an adult, the guy's walking by these sort of glacier-like sort of fields and different things, and one of these dudes comes from behind it, grabs you, and then carries you up in his mouth sort of sideways and just runs off you back into the sort of glaciers and you vanish, right? And that sort of thing like that. Like here I am way out in the far northern Quebec wilderness, right? So as you can see, you got the char and all these kinds of things. Look at I'm here at a little blob of nothing, right? There's no roads there. There's no anything. If Bigfoot was standing right behind me, I'm not going to see him. Right? Like, again, people don't sort of get this, right? They have this imagination that, you're going down the pathway that has all been explored before. No, it hasn't. No human being ever, I guarantee you, ever walked up that hill that I'm at. Nobody, not in a zillion years. Nobody's ever done it. Nobody ever will. And there's literally thousands of acres behind this to a new road somewhere, and now a giant forest after that, right? It's like never ending, a lot of these sorts of things. Like here I was in this gold mining camp there. That was extremely fun. Found some decent sort of quality things. But we'll get back to some more it's a mixture of Bigfoot sightings and sort of different water monsters and a little bit of different sort of things like that. But even though the evidence is low for this cat, it's occasionally seen either a striped or white lion-like variety sort of thing. Usually the most commonest place is especially like Alaska in some areas, and some of the other ones like that, and for the especially monster wolves and the Nahanni Valley and this sort of thing like that, the Headless Valley. So I mean, it's just another interesting cryptid out there that possibly still could exist in low numbers and sort of thing like that. I mean, these forests are insane. The taiga's well over several billion square mile, just and all these sorts, and each forest blends into the next, right? So, like I said, it's quite feasible here. The Lake Louise sighting, two lady tourists looking over Lake Louise saw one on the other side, a large black bipedal hairy man cross an opening and go into the forest to the right in 1982. So you can see where the opening is. This thing came from like there, like where you can almost see like an edge of the mountain. Now you can see there's like another mountain sort of thing going down there. The thing came there. They saw it cross just this big black kind of going object, and then he went across to the other side. And quite quickly, they said he traversed it. Like they were surprised of how fast this thing was moving, right? Sort of thing like that. The roadside Canada sighting. This exact location, a Sasquatch, red-colored, at least 7 feet tall, crossed in front of a group in a car. Ian, one of the passengers, could smell it out the window, and it reminded him of rotten salmon and skunk mixed together, right? Early 1980s, exact year, I don't know when, but was in the springtime. Now get a load of this. Now, here, this is what I was stating to you. Most of BC and many, many places I've been, this is what really it is like. Researchers, tourists, everybody on the planet, when they're going by, they already presume all this stuff has been already explored 10 trillion times. Nobody's ever been there.
no human being. People don't walk down these things. These are just along a road, and there's nowhere to go. You have to go down cliffs and things like that. Now you got a giant monster forest. They go to the logging road, which is down way further somewhere. Now they go in. Now they have the imagination that they're out in the middle of the forest, but actually the logging road area is where all the humans do go in that, and a Sasquatch would know to evade this and only cross it if they have to. Sort of things like this, right? This is where the creatures probably actually really hide in a lot of places. Like if a Bigfoot family lived right beside this road, there is no way on earth that any human being in the next 100 years is going to stop in that little location, fight his body to wiggle through thick and dense trees for nothing. There's nothing to go down there to. There's no reason to go there. But down the street, there's a nice road that can bring you there. Now you can stop off at a picnic area. You see what I mean? People don't do that, right? So the illusion is that we've covered all these things. We haven't. They just cut roads in them, and there's 10 zillion things to the left or right of you that are never touched, right? So families or groups of Bigfoot could live here for eternity, and not one single human being would see them. All right, a sort of thing like this. The Klamath River, Alaska frog lady sighting. I dated this lady that I brought out guiding, and she kind of liked me, so we ended up dating for a bit. But back in 1985 there, so what had happened to her, she was on this trip to the Klamath River, and this sort of thing like this, and she was with a group in the car, right, and they were going by, and the same thing like me, she only saw it for a split because the thing was turning and gone, but she was into frogs, this lady, and she was like some kind of science girl where she was into frogs of different sorts of things and other things. So she always made me laugh because she reminded me ages later with the sort of Charlie Sheen there, where he dated this crazy frog lady. So when I first saw that show, I started roaring laughing because it kind of reminded me of her. So anyways, I called her the frog lady because she was right into pet frogs and all these kinds of things, right? So, but anyways, when they went around, sort of, they went around, and she was with 4 others in this car. They saw this huge human-like figure. The guy was covered in black fur, very wide. He was super, super wide. She said it was a naked man drinking water in a riffle area along the Klamath River, right? So, I mean, the same sort of, that's similar to what I had, right? Very similar. Sometimes people only get these sightings for a few seconds, right? But I mean, she was 100% convinced in Bigfoot's reality after that, and just accepts him just like you would a bear or anything else, right? Like it's part of our sort of flora and fauna sort of thing, right? Brian, a native of Prince Rupert, saw a Sasquatch in the mid-70s while fishing near Prince Rupert along the shore. A Sasquatch was walking slowly in the surf, looking for fish possibly. It was pure pitch black in color, very long arms, thick-shouldered, leaned over, height unknown, but likely 8 feet or more, because he was in the sort of like, he saw it in the boat and looking up at it like from above where he was sitting down, right? He guessed it'd be somewhere in that sort of range. I met Bob Morgan. Now, there was a guy that convinced me that for sure he really believes in Sasquatch, that he saw a Sasquatch. And the reason I believe that is I met him. I saw him being interviewed by somebody else, but then I interviewed him personally and talked to him for quite, a fair amount of time. And he was very nice and gracious, very nice man. And he had, he was out camping, and he ran across this Sasquatch. And I mean, I don't want to ruin a story for him. You can find it online and that sort of thing like that. But anyways, he was out camping, and he was getting his fire going, and this Sasquatch came right past him, and he stared at it, and it went away. And so this guy quit a really good sort of career in the government and that sort of thing like that, to then chase Sasquatch, when especially then it was a lot harder to probably get funding for it and all these kinds of things. And I mean, this guy was so serious, 100%. You can actually, he did a couple of documentaries and things like that were in the 70s that you might want to watch or something like that. But a nice fellow, sort of like that. But I found him quite interesting, a very serious sort of man, and fully believed that he believes that he saw Bigfoot, and I believe that he did. So. I one of the better witnesses I've ever interviewed, where for sure I'm 99.99999%. Like nobody's gonna quit. Just like me, after seeing that sort of thing in Kickapoo Creek, that was totally the real it for me. Like, because I figured, okay, if people can't, like, if a monkey, like, sort of thing can evade us like that, and these water sort of creatures sometimes and things like that, well, then there must be something more to this, right? Like there's got to be truth to it. And I knew from my grandmother and great grandmother and these different ones, the sightings from those, that they had to be sort of based on some kind of reality here. So these different things sort of got me, more and more, the more people I interviewed and the more sort of things like that, it got me to believing and then finding footprints even yourself in the most strangest location. I mean, it's not feasible at all that you could have somebody faker doing that in a place like that. I really doubt it. And both of them actually, but especially the one in Florida. I mean, there was no pathway, road, or anything going there, and most people don't just traverse through the bush like that just for something to do and that kind of thing. But I wanted to fish on the St. John's River there and just check out some sort of things and that sort of thing like that. So I got lucky with this bizarre sort of event, right? And the other one in Quebec and sort of different things. But it's just that when you add all these things up together, I mean, you hear a screaming sort of wild man in the bush right near 50 yards from you. You smell his horrendous reek. You found footprints. You've talked to sort of hundreds of people over the years that have seen lake monsters or Sasquatch phenomena. I mean, it can't all be just imagination, right? And when you personally have seen things and know that, then what other choice should I have, right? Sort of thing like that. But some of these influences, even if you don't believe in Bigfoot or water monsters or any of these kinds of things, some of these influences ended up being very helpful for other people, sort of thing like that. Besides my quest for fishing at 2 years of age, and the same thing with lake monsters, my earliest hero in sort of bass fishing was Roland Martin, right? And 3 different times I tried to see this sort of guy here, and each time I never was able to meet my sort of legendary sort of hero, right, in the world of bass fishing. And on the second trip, I had heard he was going to be in this tournament in Florida, so I decided to, at Christmas time, and I mean, it was a rough time because my mother used to be always coming to, spending Christmas with her, so she wasn't happy that I'm going to be going down to Florida, right, and that, but I wanted to see him, and I heard he was going to be at this tournament and all this sort of thing like that. So anyways, I get down there, and we had a great time, did lots of fishing there and things like that. I saw some strange thing in the St. John's River. I saw some strange thing in a bay in Key Largo. So I had some extraordinary luck of different sort of finding cryptozoological sort of weird sort of things that I ran into. But what is most amazing to me is that if I hadn't had the huge influence in this guy, me wanting to meet him so badly, right? It's funny how we're all put on this world for some sort of reason, because the odds of me even showing up there, we had hours to kill. It was the last day of the trip. And so we decided to go to Key Largo sort of area, Florida Keys, and we were going through there. And we found this restaurant that was in this sort of bay. It might have been called Pirates Bay or something. I can't remember. It had something to do with, there was some actual real pirates that was hanging around it, right? But anyways, we had some hours to kill. We had probably about 3 hours near before we were going to get back on this plane flight. And so the gang there, they wanted to get a beer in the sort of restaurant and that sort of thing. So we're having a beers and had some little thing to eat and sat out on the beach next, right? And that sort of thing like that. And one of them drove off to try and get a six-pack sort of idea, right? And so they went off for a little bit. And we're sitting there, and the gang is all just hey, checking out the ladies and that kind of thing. Yeah, typical young teenage guys, what you're gonna do. And I'm sitting there, and I see these parents come along, and they pull out these fold-out picnic sort of seats, right, and that. And they had this little daughter and son, and I have no idea what their age was. It could have been anywhere between 5 to 9 years of age. I mean, it's hard to know because sometimes girls can be taller, like, because she looked very young, but like tall, right? Like, so she was bigger, like a 10-year-old girl would be, but maybe she was younger, right? So, but whatever the case, the girl was taller than the boy. And the two of them sort of were playing out of the sand and that sort of thing like that. And the parents started reading these newspapers. And so they're reading away like that, and the gang, they weren't paying attention to much and just hanging out and doing their thing. And I all of a sudden I see this creepy dude, man. The guy's dressed exactly like Marcel Marceau, that mime guy, right? And he's dressed in this black and white sort of tight jumpsuit like sort of thing. And he's going along, and all of a sudden he goes up to the kids and he starts making these googly faces. Then he starts pretending he's the Pied Piper. So he starts doing this flute-like thing and skipping, and he says, "Come follow me," but he's not talking, but kind of waving them and doing this sort of thing. So I start watching this creepy dude, and he starts going a little bit further and further. Meanwhile, the parents don't notice this whatsoever because they're right in their newspapers, right? So I'm watching this, and I keep seeing him getting further and further down the beach, right? So I said to the gang there, I said, "Hey guys, man, there's something creepy about this dude. I don't trust this guy. Look, he's starting to head them toward, I think he's going to try and steal these children, right?" So I said, you go and block the sort of where the parking lot exit is. You go run around and go the cars this way and come from behind them, and I'll run right at them. And the second that I get up, I'm going to scream, and then you guys will know and start coming towards it, right? And see if we can surround this dude and get these kids away from him, right? And so the guy went one way, he went the other, right? He started blocking the parking lot. I bolted right at them. This guy almost had them right in the car door. He was going to open up. It was a big 4-door sort of kind of old limo, sort of one of those old 70 cars. Like, it was big. It was 4-door. It was dark, like either black, dark brown, or dark green. It's hard to know because I was so fixated on the kids, worried about that I didn't, 100%. But it was a very big car, anyways, sort of like the old-fashioned kind that easily could fit a gang in, right? Sort of thing. So this creepy bugger, he's just about to reach for a door, and I said, "Kids, your parents need you, emergency, quick, run to the run," like this. And then the guy tried to almost grab at the little girl's hand again, and she slipped out of it and started running. And I'll never forget this dude as long as I live, man. The guy just froze there. He dropped this face like a creepy clown would do when they put the frowning face, right? And that sort of thing like that. And then the guy that was blocking the parking lot, the other guy came from behind him, so he's kind of on the side. He noticed him. And then now that he noticed there's 3 of us, the guy just gave me the most evilest look, leaped in the car, tried to run me over pretty well, and then tried to run over the guy blocking the parking lot sort of thing. We only got a partial part of his sort of plate, And meanwhile, these kids had ran back, and then the parents grabbed them and started walking off with them and folded their things, right? So I don't think that the parents or these children fully knew how deadly danger that they were, right? Like, I mean, so the thing is that I must have been sent there by some kind of angels in the sky, man, or something, man. But because the odds of being there, right, like that second, man, and everything, and just lucky, I'm one of these kind of characters that notices things, right, and that sort of thing, like that. So, but years later, I was told that I don't know if this is factual or not, but somebody has said that that Gacy nut was around in Florida at one time. I would really love to know this information because this guy was at least about 6'3", 6'4". He was in very good shape. He had bushy, sort of thicker hair that was dark, and that's about all that I can sort of really remember of him. I don't know what his eyes look like because I was so freaked out by him. I was so upset with his outfit and why he was leading these children. I knew this guy. So either this guy was going to rape them, sell them, possibly rape them and sell them, or eat them or kill them or whatever. But I guarantee you this guy was not going to provide them a nice little life as a foster parent now, or some wacko. You hear those stories where people are desperate. They want a child, right? At least in a case like that, at least the poor child isn't being beaten and tortured. This guy was a killer, like sort of thing. So, but I don't really know anything much about that. I've never watched much about him, so it creeps me out. I don't like clowns, right? So, not after that event, and also another event in the 70s of some insane clown attacking my friend because he wouldn't give him a cigarette. So I've I don't know. There was another mime-like insane clown guy that used to sell cases of beer downtown and mug people. And I mean, so I've ran across a few sort of wacky sort of clowns. So I haven't had the best luck with clowns, so I kind of tend to stay away from them, right? Sort of thing. But whatever this guy was, if he was him, I mean, that would be terrifying, right? But I don't really know that much about him. I know that he was going around in an ice cream truck and do like this, but I mean, maybe this was earlier, like when he didn't have an ice cream truck with him, whatever, right? But I kept trying to get people to send me Florida papers after that and asking them to look on the news. Did you ever hear anything about some insane mime or clown guy, right? And that's so it never got down to the mystery. But years later, I was told that that he was around at that time, possibly in Florida. So if that's the case, I might have actually had a run-in with this guy, right? Or some serial nut, possibly, right? Like that I'm not aware of, that maybe has already been caught or whatever, right? But I got the people that was with me, they phoned on the phone booth. I didn't really talk to them because I wanted to go and get the family, but the family bolted for their car and took off, right? So, because I was concerned, what if this nut, like, is hiding somewhere and waiting to see where the kids go, right, or whatever, right? So I didn't know, right, like what, but anyways, they claim they gave a partial part of the license plate, and that the cops would look for them, right? So. Anyways, most horrendous, terrifying sort of thing, right? Like, I mean, but I mean, these little kids would have been. So, if you ever heard any story like that about some nut playing this Pied Piper sort of gambit, I'd like to know, man, because I always wondered what happened to this lunatic, right? Like, is it possible that that he actually did do that, right? Like, I mean, like, was he that sort of guy, right? Like, or some other kook, right? But anyways, it was terrifying. But the Lake Shuswap beast, besides catching huge squawfish now called pike minnow, the natives, like I said, talk about this Tazama great serpent and that sort of thing like that. But
I had something strip my line completely from this point that I was fishing off of. In seconds, it was gone. But I hadn't caught in ages. I had caught them out in the western United States when I was younger. Those Colorado squaw fish down Pike Meadow, sort of thing, right? And they used to at one time actually get up 5 feet, right? And that sort of thing like that. So this Tazama guy, I don't know, like I said, it was hard to get stories collect about this sort of thing like that. But the few that I did, I mentioned the book and that sort of thing like that. But I did have a couple of strange sort of incidences in there that, and I saw a pretty large wave where no boats had been by for a long, long time, and that lake as well. That is kind of interesting. But I mean, it was a wave. I didn't see any of the animal or whatever it would have been that was causing that sort of thing like that. But when skeptics tell you, like I said, where's the creature going to find the food, right? Like, yeah, these steelhead to smallmouth bass even exist. There are different ones, right? It doesn't. A lot of people have done stocking in BC, even carp and all kinds of things. So there's certainly piles of food here. Like here's this tournament that I won there, and I mean, you can see the monsters here went after another, right? Sort of thing like that. So they have all kinds of big fishing contests down there too, and that sort of thing like that for different salmonoids and trout and different things like that. Some are only fly fishing contests, different ones, right? Like that go on. So if you want a fishing paradise, BC, Alaska, and all these kinds of places is definitely the place to go, right? Like that. And I mean, they got everything, other things from, normal rainbows, browns, all kinds of other species have been stocked in there, lingcod, and all kinds of different ones, right? Giant sturgeon, and a lot of the rivers and lakes, which is fully responsible for many of the BC lake monster and sort of river sightings is that sort of thing is definitely sturgeon. I talk about a lot about that in the book and that sort of thing like that. Sheila and her Kelowna Ogopogo monster sighting here, and you can clearly see. I mean, seriously, the belts of forests and the different things that they all attach to each other. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and the amount of lakes. Many of these lakes have interconnections to each other through waterway systems. So when a creature gets traversed off, like I said, I saw even in the Rideau Canal a giant otter. I mean, it was 6 foot something on him. He was huge, he was a very, very large otter. And I mean, this guy was stuck in there for quite a while, and he found his way, meandered his way out, and they filled up the water, and he just went up. Or he might have even went to Dow's Lake and climbed up the sides of it when the water was shallow. But one way or the other, he got his way out of there. Nobody found one dead or anything like that. And I mean, nobody even barely noticed this creature. And here he's like a 6 foot something swimming up on the surface all the time, right? As just myself and a handful of other people that ever even saw the thing, right? So it just goes to show, like, I mean, it's easier than what people think that a creature in the water could hide from you, and especially, large water systems like Okanagan and all these ones, right? Like, you could be here in the boat. The creature, if there's only a handful of them, is, I mean, a mile away in a bay at that moment. Like the odds of you both even bumping into each other is fairly slim, depending on the surface of water that there is, like how many square miles and all that sort of thing. Like imagine Lake Baikal, the odds of you running across the Baikal Dragon over 5,000 kilometers of sort of area of surface area of water, right? And that sort of thing like that. So even in the kilometer, you might not see the creature. He could just be barely under the surface, so you might not even notice him. So that means you have only a 1 in 50,000 chance of even being in the spot of 1 acre of the spot where he might be, right? So as you can imagine, that doesn't happen very often, right? And that sort of thing like that. So people need to keep those kinds of things in mind. Like Sheila and her boyfriend saw a 30 foot or more
pole-shaped huge snake with humps on the beach, Ari and Kelowna, both very good witnesses. They were in their 20s at the time and serious. She was originally a Newfie that moved out west. They know it must have been that long at least, and at least 10 others saw the beast rise and swim up and down with the humps. The creature went by a swimmer and was at least 5 times or more longer than him, because the guy was kind of, sideways, like swimming his normal length of his body, and the creature swam right past him, right? When I saw it, I saw humps, but I didn't see like what they did, these little ridgy hump like sort of things right on it, right? But I mean, I was in a bit more choppy water when I saw it, so it was more like this sort of thing. So it could be that, it's not descriptive enough from where I was, and it happened so fast and it's blurry for a split second. It was only seconds again that I saw this, right? But here, here's what he looks like from most descriptions. That's pretty well what about I seen. I'd say about the same thickness, not much difference. I didn't see the ripples like Sheila did on the top here, but I just seen the humps, and it looked to be like a smoothie, whaley like sort of surface to it of some sort. And the head was a bit more eelish instead of dragonish like they have it here. But Sheila's was more dragonish. So my suggestion is a lot of them are dragonish, some are more eelish. Either it's a separate phenomena, giant eel, and also a serpent-like beast that lives there, or that it's a male-female thing, any of that sort of thing, right? Like, sort of thing that it could be, right? Next year, the Britannia Bay monster. In the 1940s, just above the old Britannia Beach, a young boy was swimming when a witness named Gordy watched in horror a giant head and body of a titanic snake-like beast start to chase the kid. A canoeist going by saw the creature and actually leaped out of his canoe and got in front of the kid and smashed the paddle on the creature, and it made a great splash and then just bolted and swam off, right? There was a lot of reports, especially in the 1800s, of sort of later 1800s and that early 1900s, of a giant snake-like beast that was in this sort of area, all the way up to Arnprior, different sections of Lac-des-Chaines, all the different sections in this upper Ottawa sort of river, right? And this beast was seen a lot of sort of times. I had several sightings in the upper Ottawa River further away from Britannia, that sort of thing. But there was a lot of sort of things of this. And they used to find giant tracks in the springtime and in the fall of huge, wide 2, 3, 4 foot sort of wide tracks that looked like a pole, like a snake, that would come up from the river and go down to the river, right? So some kind of big monster or serpent. A whole even captain and his crew saw on one event, and another sort of whole group in another boat. Some French trappers were attacked by this sort of giant eel-like sort of creature, right? So a lot of sort of ones over that, but this is an unknown one, and there was another one around Britannia Bay, and also one right near what the heck's the name of it there? Oh my goodness. A little bit further down, there's another sort of little bay, and in that sort of area, towards sort of the power station and some of these other ones there. There's been giant fish, sturgeon of hundreds of pounds towing people around, and all kinds of weird sort of sightings over the years of strange things, and walking fish with legs in them, and the devil flying canoe. so I mean, Britannia's got some pretty weird things, some werewolf sightings, and other sorts of things. Nowadays, mostly you see just ladies sunbathing and that sort of thing like that. So not much of the monster anymore. Probably the zebra mussels ate them, maybe, or whatever. Right? But I would the most recent sighting that I know of the Ottawa River monster was about 217. So
I haven't heard of anybody seeing them in recent sort of times, but I talk a little bit more about this a little bit later here in the mugwump Lake Temiskaming sort of beast in the Ottawa River a little bit more. It's fascinating. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah, like I said, a lot of these lake monster stories and things are very old. They're just as old as Ness, a lot of them, and different things like that. And one had nothing to do with each other. They're just simply a different water sort of monster phenomena, right? The muskrat lake monster, I still can't find somebody with a VCR. I hear it's back in the day, come back winning a tournament there and that sort of thing like that. And uh, whenever I'm able to get this, it would be really nice here because a lot of people suggested that there's these shows are suggesting that muskrat lake monster is an alligator or all these kinds of things. It's not. One of them went like not even 8 or 10 foot near the boat. It was pretty close. And it shot its head up after the scientists looked at it, sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure it was a seal, gray or elephant seal, sort of thing like that. And there was two of them. At first, I thought it was one sort of big sea monster of some sort. I'd heard of the muskrat lake monster, but I didn't believe in it, and I figured it was a sturgeon of some sort, right? And I did pick up giant sturgeon-like hooks on the screens numerous times, actually being there several times. In different fishing contests and going ice fishing there and things, and picked up some pretty huge sort of things in there, and also caught muskie there that wasn't even known in the lake for ages to come. Just science in early 2000 and some had described that there was muskies in it. I had gotten them. There's Tay River, and there's this other sort of little dab-like spot that shoots down, and I had caught muskies out of there, right? Sort of thing like that. And there's even tiger muskie, a mixture of the two, sort of thing like that, that was caught in another trip. So other fish can get in through different sort of system, right? And the Ottawa River's not far off from it. There's also an underground caving system that you can actually be under the lake and breathe fresh air. So it's fascinating, that sort of thing like that. But what I believe that 100%, like, I mean, it wasn't an alligator for sure, and no alligators on Earth can swim that fast anyway. But it was the seals of some sort. There's either two explanations. In the 1940s, the government supposedly had tested seals in this lake, and it could have been a few that escaped. Or left them here, or B, that wayward seals that had gotten up here ages ago, one time that got lost up the Ottawa River system, got in here, and it's a known habit of seals. Once they start visiting a certain place, they'll actually be able to go back to it again and do sort of weird things like that. And a lot of lakes that I argued years ago, some of my earlier viewers, I told you that there was landlocked seals and lake Lake Baikal and different ones, right? I told you about, but I told you that there used to be in Lake Ontario a landlocked seals, and also that there's landlocked seals in a lot of different lakes in Canada that people don't realize are actually there, right? And like Lake Iliamana, they just recognize that they exist, and I had mentioned them before, and all these skeptics said no, there's only the one Lake Baikal. Or to see is completely inaccurate. There used to even be a large population in Lake Ontario and in Lake Erie in the 1800s of seals that like an actual more endemic one to the area, like where they weren't. They had gotten there from ages before, probably, and built a small colony, right? And that sort of thing like that. So seals can do this sort of behavior. They've been found thousands of miles up. So that's probably why the muskrat lake monster isn't seen that often. Maybe the odd wayward seal gets, if they're lost a certain way, they end up getting meandering to the system eventually, right? Or that it was these let loose ones. But anyways, we'll get this film up there eventually, but here's where I ran across the Quio Bigfoot man there. I also hooked a Titanic sturgeon, landed it, touched it. I couldn't drag it back. We had nothing to grab onto this thing, and I didn't want to kill it. And I was up in this sort of
when I landed it, I was up in the front and I was trying to get my friend to sort of, what I wanted to do was turn him around and maybe slowly drag him and we could get him back, sort of thing like that. But I couldn't grasp onto him very well and that sort of thing like that. And I didn't want to drown him. And this guy rolled another time and the line finally cut and he went away. But I mean, it didn't matter. He was landed. It was done, right? I was going to let him go in a second anyways, but I really wanted a picture of him, right? Because he was Titanic. It's like absolutely astonishing, hundreds of pounds of fish here. Like, because this thing was at least about 10 foot on it. I had a relative that actually in Sturgeon Falls actually had gotten, it's in my book, he'd gotten a sturgeon so big it was a little bit bigger than his aluminum 14-foot boat that he had. And sort of thing like that. And he had a partial picture of the head of it. You can see it's Titanic, it's monstrous. So it's probably true, like I said. So he might have gotten a bigger one than I ever have. There's even a picture of one in Minnesota that's 100% authentic. It was 15 foot tall. You can see people that are 6 foot something that isn't even half the height of it that are standing beside it. I mean, astonishing. You can find it in the Minnesota records. By far the largest lake sturgeon ever recorded. It was well over 400 and some pounds. There was a Vladikov scientist guy that had recorded one over in Quebec over 14 foot. And I saw a monster one there that I almost hooked. That I thought at first we thought it was a log in the water. And then I started observing it and realized it was a giant sturgeon. And this dude was like at least about 15 foot on him. And I, like I said, I hooked into some Titanic things that pulled us around for hours. The hook straightened out or different things, right? Has happened. But anyways, I would catch bait or big wild golden shiners and a big chub of different sorts and a dace and things like that. And fish for these sturgeon and big muskies and sort of things like that. Suckers, these kinds of species, right? But the wild man in Quebec, he lived not too far from here. so there he is. So I found that photo and I said, oh yeah, so that's the Queon monster there, right? So. But anyways, now here's another sighting from Alberta. A man named Barry saw from this exact spot across the lake a dark fur-covered beast easily traversed the gully and vanished on a mountain edge in 1977. So pretty well the same sort of this area has had some pretty decent sort of sightings like that. As you know, Alberta has amazing pike fishing, a lot of sort of places like that, especially ice fishing too, and these sort of things like that. And these different provinces, like they don't have giant muskies there, but and that sort of thing like that. But Ontario and Quebec certainly does, and these wilderness areas. And the further you go out there, away from the crowd, the more sort of untouched fishing pressure and things like that. Now, these monsters were caught in actually urban areas there, right? Here's me winning ice fishing tournament way back in the sort of day, and this is another monster muskie, right? Sort of thing like that. But these things, and sadly, over the ages of 5 million photos, a lot of people, when I catch these monsters, a lot of times they cut my head off. They claim by accident, right? So over the years, I demand, I'd say, let me see that photo. I want to see the screen once they start becoming electronic a little bit more, right? Sometimes, because it's astonishing how many all of a sudden part of your body's missing. Because the person's with you can't believe the size of the fish, and they're sort of, yeah, you know what I mean, a bit upset with this, right? But I mean, yeah, you know, you've been doing it since you were 2, right? Like, I mean, I know what I'm doing, right? Sort of thing like that. But anyway. So personal sightings of a funny nature. I never try and make fun of witnesses, and I fully try to be supportive of their sightings. But occasionally there's an insane one that's so out there that, you know, or they have an illogical explanation. But is still mysterious, such as my sightings of the Ottawa River werewolf back many moons ago. Not sure even what year this was, but I was guiding this fellow, and his friend was supposed to join us for sturgeon and drum fishing, right? And so we waited for this guy, and we kept waiting and waiting, and that sort of thing like that. So eventually decided to go, right? So I go out halfway out in the river there, and I get in this deep pool below this island, and started using what you would later on they started calling pop-up rigs, but same kind of idea. I would float bait up off to the bottom there for a sturgeon and catfish like that, and swim it in the sort of current, right? With these crayfish and pieces of liver, clams, things like that, right? That you'd catch out of the river, right? That sort of thing. So, anyways, it was about midnight there, and it slowed down. We'd hooked some and that sort of thing like that. And I'm looking across, and it was pretty well a moonlit night, except for the odd cloud and that sort of thing. And it was pretty crystal clear at that point. And all of a sudden, you see this big wave and this splashing, and it started coming closer and closer. And I said, "What the hell is that?" And the guy said, "Oh my goodness." He said, "I don't know, like this." So it kept getting closer. So I said, "My God, this thing's coming towards us." I said, "What is it? Is it the Ottawa River Monster?" Right? Like, so I started out getting closer and closer. And then finally, you realize that it's actually a human of some sort swimming, right? So I said, "What is this lunatic doing? Why did he swim from shore out to here?" So then he gets go closer, and all of a sudden I see this dude, his head pops up. The guy looks like just like a werewolf, and he had hands like a werewolf, like really creepy, long, creepy sort of fingers and everything on him like this. So I was going to smash him with my oar, but luckily the guy that was with me, he recognized him, but it was his buddy that we were waiting for. So this lunatic, instead of like calling us from the shoreline, this guy started waving, like started swimming out towards us, right? I couldn't believe this. I've never seen anything like this in my life, right? So I said, "Oh my goodness, man, like this." So anyways, we get him inside this sort of thing, and he started going on, and I said, "What are you doing? Like swimming across like this?" And he says, "I'm hungry. I'm hungry." He says, I want to go on the island. I want to hunt the big game, the big game." Right? I said, "Big game?" I said, "What kind of big game are you going to find on this island? It's barren pretty well. It's got a couple of trees on it. Like, you might find a squirrel if you're lucky. I doubt even a squirrel exists on it, right?" So he says, "No, the big game's there." So I said, "Okay, whatever." I was just glad to get rid of this lunatic. So I said, "Okay, I'll drop you off there," right? So we go in the dark, and I bring him up, and the clouds have started coming up again, and that sort of thing like that. So dropped him off on the shore, and just was glad to get rid of him. And we went back into this hole and started fishing again, right? So I kept looking over here and there, and sometimes I wouldn't see him, and then sometimes you would, and that sort of thing like that. And then all of a sudden I start seeing this splashing, right? And this guy, he's back in the water again. And I said, "Oh my God, what's he doing? Like, is he crazy? Like, why is he swimming? Why didn't he just call us and we'll go get him," right? So he starts coming, and then all of a sudden I see that there's a net in his hand. And I said, "Where the hell did he get a net?" Then I realized he had scoffed my net. Then I realized he's got a giant seagull inside. Right? And I said, "What the hell are you doing?" He says, "I'm hungry. I'm hungry." I said, "You're not eating that friggin' seagull," right? I was going to say F and Z, but anyways, I'll keep it PG here, right? And so I got pretty insanely mad. I'm pretty protective of animals, right? so I didn't want him to eat this sort of a seagull. I was now losing my patience with this lunatic. So I told him, I said, "Listen, man," I said, "I'll give you something to eat. I got some crap around here." But I said, "You're not eating that freaking seagull, right?" So anyways, I finally get this seagull away from him, and he lets it go, right? Thank goodness, right? So this lunatic, then I gave him this freaking a bag there, and he starts munching down on that sort of thing like that. So then he says, "I'm still hungry. I'm hungry," like this, dude. So he says, I want to sort of fish." So I said, "Okay, oh my God." Like, so I was worried next that he was going to, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, probably, God knows what, eat the fishing rod or whatever he was going to do, right? Sort of thing like this. So, I mean, so anyways, I gave him this box of Ritz cracker, and he wanted pot and beer and all these kinds of things he was asking for, and he was driving me nuts, so I just shut him up, and I couldn't believe, I mean, he inhaled this whole box in less than seemingly a few minutes, right? So anyways, then he decides, he says, I want to fish, right? So I just to get rid of him, I give him one of the fishing rods there, and lo and behold, he actually catches one. So here he is. Okay, so you can see the catfish there. So he demanded then that we bring him to this island, and the guy was already gnawing on it raw, and he didn't even want to wait for me to heat up this hibachi like thing and get the fish cooking, right? And I told him he was insane for eating them because it's a mute in Ottawa River and it's loaded full of garbage, and I wouldn't eat this fish if you paid me, right? The older the catfish is, the more mutant garbage he's been eating, right? But anyways, but so what's crazy about this is here you can see he's trying to eat the seagull. But if you look at him, he looks like a werewolf. He had this like pointed ears, and he had the chin like a werewolf, and the sort of like the hair. I mean, so I hid his face because I didn't want to sort of, but I mean, the most wackiest client I've ever had. So anyways, as you can imagine, I after he ate this mutant fish in the morning, gnawing on it half raw and that sort of thing, and torturing it and chopping it up and doing different things to it. I mean, it was a wild story. Anyway, so I was glad to get rid of these two and back to having hopefully a more normal client in the future, right? So, I mean, I'll never forget this as long as I live. I mean, this guy was wacko. So now, if you think that's crazy enough, what was funny is that he then told me about this Bigfoot story that right near where we were camping on this, went on this island, right, to relax for a little bit. And that not far from there, Bigfoot had stolen his beer. So what was weird though is an actual real footprint was found there, and so I mean, just because somebody's crazy, maybe he really did see Bigfoot like at the same time, right? So I don't know, but anyways, or maybe he's a werewolf. Maybe werewolf, like maybe Bigfoot knows he's a werewolf and would. That's why he liked him. But anyways, so there was a real live werewolf that I guided. So, but what was even more crazy is so the guy, besides all that sort of thing like that, the Reno Center, not that massively long later, I think it was like a year or two later or something, I can't remember. But anyways, the Reno Center had opened up, and I ran across Dan Aykroyd and actually spoke to him for a few minutes. He was hiding. He didn't want the gang all knowing he was there, and he was in front of some kind of Beamish or Woolco or whatever it was. It was some kind of old-fashioned store that doesn't even exist anymore, Woolworth maybe, one of those sort of thing. And so Trudeau was there. He opened it up. And so the action was going on, and I'm walking around, and this is hours later, and this gang of security guards all circle around this sort of character, and I'm looking at him, and the guy looks like a werewolf again, and I said, oh my God, I said, that's that werewolf guy that I guided, right? So I hadn't seen him in ages, right? So all of them are circling around him, and they said, hey, you, we know it's you. You are the poop artist. We got you this time. We got you. Like this, I said, the poop artist. So apparently this crazy man was using, let's say, exotic things as painting material. So I'm not going to go any further right now. No, even stranger is not somewhere around that time, maybe a few years later or something like that. I don't know if it's the same guy or not, but there was some lunatic that looked like a werewolf, the same thing. He was hairy and all that sort of thing. And there was some nut that was caught inside of outhouses in Gatineau, when they called him the Gatineau Poop Man. the poop beast or different names that they had, but that kind of thing. And what this lunatic was doing for several years is he was leaping around, jumping inside of an outhouse toilet and waiting for somebody to go to the bathroom. Right? So I can't, like, how can somebody be that insane, man? But anyway, this guy, apparently they caught him and put him for psychiatric thing, but I never saw a picture of him or anything, and I wondered if maybe it was the same lunatic, right? So, but anyway, so I might have guided the sort of the poop man. So he was a werewolf man. He was an eccentric, bizarre artist, and that sort of thing like that. So, so if you don't believe in werewolves, I don't know, they could be out there. I'll never forget that. Seriously, the strangest individual I've never ever, like, wow. I mean, now thinking about it just even freaking me out. But I mean, who's to say, again, just because the guy's was a bit out there, right? I mean, does that necessarily mean that he really didn't see a Bigfoot, considering that a footprint was found there, right? Like, it's weird, right? So who knows, right? But anyways, other interesting sort of mysteries here. The Mississippi Lake mystery here. Now, this lake here is not supposed to have like lingcod in it, okay? But I actually caught one. I was looking for bait along the shorelines and things like that, and I caught one in my hand. Here's me with some early tournament way back in the day, sort of thing, before they used to have the catch and live and release and the live release and that sort of thing, right? But I wouldn't release that one on the right of me there. That's a cutie pie mermaid there for sure, sort of thing like that. So I didn't want to let her go either. But all kidding aside, anyway, I just seen that, but it was just interesting that I actually was scooping out bait looking for crayfish and kinds of things like the clams and stuff. And I actually caught this baby lingcod that was underneath this rock, and they're not supposed to be in there, but there's relic populations of them even in the Mississippi River chain, the Ottawa River. There's different ones of them all over the place of these sort of, they're like a freshwater cod that got trapped after when the floods and sort of things like that. And they're the cool of the cool. These guys love really cold water. You get them way more in the wintertime when you're ice fishing and that sort of thing like that. But I actually, so it's mysterious. What fascinated me the most, this was quite warm summer. The water was very warm along the shoreline, yet here a lingcod is able to tolerate that in such a shallow water. So, I mean, that's completely against my scientific ichthyology training or anybody else's out there. I mean, these guys are known to be the cool of the cool. They prefer, that's how, like at the Mississippi River in the United States, they thought they were extinct and for a long time didn't even know that they existed in there. But there's small pockets of them that live in these deep pools where there's cold water springs and things, right? So they'll hunt these out and that sort of thing like that. But just another little mystery cryptid, even though the creature's known, is fascinating. Same with a bowfin. You'll get bowfin, like I caught a bowfin a few times in White Lake. They're not really supposed to live in there. Nobody knows how they ever got in there. Same thing with Ottawa River. I'm the only person ever that, besides two, that were caught in a net. And apparently a story from somebody caught one in Rockland. So altogether, 4 human beings in a history of over 100 and some years of netting and fishing and this sort of thing have only ran across a bowfin, only 4 individuals. When in the States, I used to fish for them all over the place and quite really skilled at catching them and that sort of thing like that. And they're no problem to catch if you understand their behaviors and that sort of thing like that. But simply the Ottawa River, these are a super relic population of them, and I mean so low that the odds of you having your bait at that one or two that's floating around the river at any time is not good. Right? So that's why, right? But I mean, the more you fish, of course, then the more likely that something like this could occur, and that's why I've seen strange anomalies in the water more than the average person, because I guided there for ages and fished around the clock in it, right? So of course, is that way more probability that you would see something than if you just visited once a year, sort of thing, right? The Charleston Lake Beast, from the 1800s era to the 70s, I had collected massive amounts of accounts from the lake of giant snakes over 20 feet long to a brontosaurus-like creature. I had, besides my mom and my grandmother, my great-grandmother, having sightings of huge snakes to a Loch Ness Monster variety, a sighting by a boat guide in 1940s in a place called Western Bay here. You can see it. And he was guiding people for lake trout. They were coming back to the docks when one of the charter people lost their hat. So the guy decided to swing it around, right? And he stopped and he went to grab it. And this huge dark shadow approached the hat. And the charter guy screamed and the guy grabbed his hat. And then he sort of, like the beast then kind of smashed right into the side of the sort of boat, almost capsized it. And then it kept going down the bay into the depths and vanished. It had thick, long neck, a small head with possibly legs or fins of some sort. All they could see is shadowy. Weren't sure whether they were legs or fins. In the 1940s, in the same area that I had my sighting, two men were attacked by what looked like a brontosaurus-like beast that knocked their boat over. They swam to shore, terrified losing the boat until rescuers got it. I had caught a giant muskie over 60 inches in a stream, showing next year that'll be coming up. That was not recognized by science until early 2000. That even lived in the lake, so they didn't even know this. And again, like I said, I've done this in many kinds of lakes where I've gotten like largemouth bass or different species that supposedly don't live in them, right? So it's interesting, right? Like as well as trout, the big bass, whitefish, and other things in this stream with crappie jigs. In the 60s, I started doing this and that sort of thing like that. And what's coming up there, you'll see them in a second. They're a very old large bass. And but I had collected all these kinds of giant snake sort of reports. I personally saw a snake that's wider than one of the chutes there. And I don't really know how wide these things are. I'm guessing like another like 10 feet, probably 8-10 foot. Each span one, maybe 11, like somewhere in there. It's hard to know because you can't tell from the top. You have to look underneath and then down to see exactly the width of it. So I've never actually measured them, but let's say they're like 8 to 10 foot sort of range, right? This snake was way bigger. It was wider than that whole sort of opening. Super thick black with this huge green. It was very similar like a garter snake, except much, much different, about 4 times thicker than a garter snake of a real big one. And a monster head on him, and he was all coiled up. So he had to have been massive, quite a few feet more longer because he wasn't straightened out right. A couple that I saw right beside this place called Lansdowne, there's a little bridge, and this bridge, this giant snake, black snake, was so huge that it actually covered the side of the road on the left-hand side, covered the whole highway, little bridge road, and then the snake's monster's head was up on the other side of the pavement sidewalk-like thing, and going all the way down, almost touching to the edge of the bridge. They said there's no way that this thing was way, like, under 20 feet. It's not possible, and way more likely towards 30 feet, and that sort of thing like that. My mother saw one larger than her sort of canoe, and the list goes on of these kinds of things like that. I was in the same bay where these guys and saw this brontosaurus-like creature, and I saw some shadowy, weird thing that kept going around. I could see him off in the distance. He'd come back and forth. It was way too wide to be a sturgeon. It was very big, 15, 20 foot long at least. Sort of, it was larger than the aluminum sort of boat I was in at the time. I watched this thing on and off, appear and disappear on and off, maybe for about 2 hours. I seen it at different, and then one time it came closer and closer, started going to the boat. Like it looked like this thing was feeding of some sort or whatever. And I could see a thinner, longer front area, then a big, fat, wide area, and two stumpish like things on the side. That was it. The thing started coming towards underneath the boat, sort of like that. I actually got nervous and sort of because I was a lot younger. And so I turned on the boat and skedaddled out of there. It just gave me the creeps, like as if this thing was possibly stalking me, right? So that was it, right? Like so, but I mean, I that was the only super monster snake. I saw a lot of big snakes there, but not like that one. That one was super stupendous. And these monster black snakes that have been seen all through Ontario. I have a record of one that was killed. That's in a local Penticton paper. I think it was Penticton or whatever it's called. Way back in the 1930s, that was 32 feet long. Was killed, right? And so I got a bunch of different lakes and I covered these possibly now extinct giant sort of snakes. I don't hear too many tales in these modern times. They could be. I don't get to visit these places as much anymore, right? Sort of thing like that. But I hear it's funny, all the locals, including game wardens and different ones, said, oh, don't fish in that stream. You'll never catch anything there. They won't bite. Here's an ancient old bass here that one of them, right? And like I said, I've been doing this since the 60s in this stream. It was crystal clear. These fish, you could cast in front of them 10 million lures. They'll look at you and stare at it and that sort of thing. But if you're, I would use like 2 pound line, 4 pound line, these kinds of things, microscopic, tiny little presentations and very subtle things, and hide in spots and cast to them. And I'm, like I said, extremely skilled at landing big fish on light line and that sort of thing like that. So that sort of thing. But here you can see that. Can you see the swirls down below? That's created by one of the chutes. So you can see it's fairly wide here. That what it creates, right? So to give you an idea of how big that this snake was, right? And that sort of thing. There's also been Bigfoot sightings that was around a camp that was over there, a few of them that I mentioned. I'll mention another time and that sort of thing like that. But I mean, it's one of these cryptids. I mean, I haven't found any reports since the 1970s of one and that sort of thing like that. And I don't know. There could be something to it. In my book, I cover a bunch more of these, but I just wanted to give you an idea that's fascinating that a lot of lake monster lakes that used to have sightings in them that were frequent, now nothing, right? And that sort of thing. Like, because when I was there the last time, I didn't see squat. Couldn't find a single human being that had seen anything in the lake. I saw no big snakes anymore. I was disappointed by that, right? And that sort of thing like that. But that doesn't mean that they didn't exist. I wasn't at the best time of year there either for it and that sort of thing like that. So that's another sort of thing. But anyways, it's just if the phenomenon is still going on, I don't know. But in the book there, I cover this sort of thing like that and some other cases and sort of things like that. But I still got a kick coming back, and they said, "Oh no, don't fish in the stream here, wasting your time. Guarantee you won't catch one." So I've been hearing that since the 60s, and I still catch it. So, the Lake Nipigon monster, not only world record size brook trout to pike over 50 inches, are rarely seen. A serpent to giant fish stories have appeared from time to time there, including sightings of seals. One interesting account, some fly fishermen in 1979 decided to fish a shoal and bringing in a huge brook trout. A huge snake-like beast came chasing it and grabbed it and broke the line. It had black scales, face like a dragon to a snake-like sort of body, at least about 7 meters or more long. So
So fascinating sort of thing like that. Here's back in a tournament that I was in back in the 70s, fishing a trout contest, Lake Superior, and but I had gotten this pygmy whitefish, right? And I'm one of the probably last people ever on Earth that had ever caught one, and also blue walleye. So, so I'm good with the rare guys, right? And I caught it with a crappie jig, so I'm probably the world's first and only human being that ever caught a pygmy whitefish with a crappie jig. So even in the Freshwater Hall of Fame, I should be for even that. And I got a Siskoad, right, which is like they were thought extinct for a long time now. There's been some caught, a few, so they're not now considered extinct, but extremely rare, right? Like sort of, but what they are is a strange strain of lake trout that's endemic to Lake Superior, and they're really oily. And when I brought this fish up, I said, "Oh my God, like this!" And the oil, the slick, I mean, it was gooing out of this stuff, right? And the guy explained it to me like that, and I was a deadly fish expert then at that, but I had not. Didn't realize that it was actually different, like a butterfly lakers. I'd known about them in Great Bear Lake and other ones. I'd heard of these kinds of things, but I didn't realize it was actually considered like a separate sort of thing, slightly in a different strain, right? But they were really a deeper water one than the typical one, right? But I mean, it was so cool. I did experiments on the old paper graphs and things like that. You could see these fish suspended down there, and one of them I caught on this crappie jig was a pygmy whitefish. So only one I ever caught my entire life. I caught two blue walleye before they went extinct. One in the late 60s and one in the very early 70s, and that was it. So I was lucky enough, but I mean, there's a lot of this Lake Superior there, a lot of big sort of monsters, sturgeon and different sort of things have been seen there over the ages, serpents, especially the 1800s and things like that. I cover a lot about that in the book and that sort of thing like that. The Gwine River monster, when I was in a fly-in trip, I mean, this astounded us. There is no boats, no people, there's no nothing, no roads for massive gazillions of miles. This is like what's his name, Survivor guy, when they drop you off, and Les Strauss, or when they drop you off in the middle of nowhere. As you can see in behind me, this is like endless. No roads, no giant bears and moose and 10 zillion walleyes. I mean, the worst day that I think one of the people that I was with maybe was about 120 fish. I got 183 or 187 the first day. The next day was a little bit less, 150 something or something like that. I got it written down something, but anyway, so that sort of range, and then just every day it shrank by one or two, and more because we were just getting so bored of it, right? But monster pike, they claimed there was no pike in the reservoir. They're completely wrong, and there's some in there over 5 foot in length. Monsters. Like I one inhaled. I had this walleye that was bringing up about 8 pounds on, and there's no way this dude wasn't well in the 40-some pound class. I mean, it was just absolutely titanic. He just inhaled the thing like nothing. It was a monster, right? That sort of thing like that. But this Green Reservoir, what we decide to do just to get away from the crowd, because everybody fishes in the same place, and there's only that one sort of outlet. So there's nothing, right? There's no boats, there's no people, there's no anything, right? Like there's nothing. So what we did is you could grab the cans of gas yourself off the dock. The guy would always keep them filled. So I took 4 going back, and have so we would only go 3 cans of gas to go where no man had went before. And when we were out in this bay, we saw this titanic black back sort of hump thing come out of the water and was going right down the middle of the reservoir, made titanic waves and vanished. It was like the size of a whale-like thing. It was not a sturgeon. That can't be. And it more was loopy, like a serpent would be, right? So that's one of the better sort of where
100% no, it wasn't a sturgeon or some kind of thing like that. This was alive, whatever it was. And I found out from talking to the guy that was running some of the flying things, and that others have seen these kinds of things. And I talked to one other witness that saw big waves in there, and they couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Right, same kind of idea, right? But I mean, this place is astonishing, and it's monstrous reservoir, and of course these waters all interconnect to finally get into the ocean, right? So I mean, any kind of feasibility. But if you wanted a spectacular sort of place to fish for walleyes, only mackerel you can't sort of beat there, by I'll tell you. Sort of thing like that. But what I was going to say is I was going to include just a little bit about the mugwump there. One part of the Ottawa River, lots of people, they've said these sort of alligator-like things and different sort of things. And yes, there has been a few sightings of these sort of strange anomalies. It wouldn't be surprising that an alligator or two was let in there, but the main Ottawa River monster is not like that. Mostly it's titanic fish, okay? But the Lake Timiskaming one in particular is two things: is sturgeon, which I've hooked and landed in there, and also seen one of titanic epic size that went by that certainly is responsible for a lot of these sightings. But what is also in there is seals. I don't know how many or how often they come up there, but I was with another person at night. We were ice fishing. The guy kept telling me about how his minnows would be stolen sometimes in the traps, and that a couple of times he had seen something strange pop their head up, but he couldn't see it well. And we were right there. All of a sudden, I heard jingling around one of the lines there, and this friggin' head popped right up, man. I shined the flashlight. It was only like 3, 4 feet from this dude, and both of us were staring right at him. Crystal clear. Was a dark grayish seal, like dark gray to black ish range in there. Like, it was dark, not like a light gray, like dark gray. Yeah, if it was gray, it could have been blackish, but it started, to me, it looked like, darkish, more gray than pure black. But anyways, it was very dark. A very small seal, probably about, I doubt he'd be any more than 4 or 5 foot on this sort of thing on him. And 100%, I saw that. The guy was with me saw that, and another person I went on another outing with saw one of them pop their heads through the holes. So it's actually fairly common that people have seen these in the winter, the odd time, and in the summer months, splashing around. That's what the mugwump is. So at certain ages, I guess more of them were around. Maybe there's less now, or maybe people don't report the sighting. Who knows? Sort of thing like that. But for sure, the mugwump isn't an alligator, not that I'm aware of. And the Ottawa River monster is not an alligator 99.99% of the time. Like I said, there's been a few weird. There was one found dead in the Ottawa River once, a little baby one. Some guy actually gave me a stuffed alligator ages ago, and he claimed that it was found in the Mississippi River, and that sort of thing. But I think he was just having fun with me, sort of like a sort of thing. So, but I mean, these things, people throw their pets in. It's feasible that the creature could survive for a certain amount, and especially if it had a warm water sewer or any kinds of things like that. That is really true. New York sewer alligators actually have been really caught. That's 100% fact. It's not an urban legend. It's factual things, sort of thing like that, and actually a fair amount of times, and even as far as Australia, Canada, it's happened before, where there's very good newspaper articles, all sorts of things, a whole book even written about how this guy, a manager of the New York sewer system, would have battles with these things and was shooting them down in there. There were so many of them, because there was huge crazes of people getting pet alligators, and they'd drop them in, and that sort of get
rid of them once they start getting too big, and they were able to survive it, right? And that sort of thing like that. All they got to do is find some heated area that's warmer and that sort of thing like that, and they acclimate to it over time, I'd imagine, where they get sort of tougher to it, right? And that sort of thing like that. Alligators have been reported in out in Montana, sort of in the rivers there. There was one that apparently the thing was living there for years because people had reported, kept seeing an alligator in there in the Colorado River for about 3-4 years, and all of a sudden one guy actually got it on film, and it really is one sort of thing like that. And this thing's living in the Colorado River in the freezing cold like that. So it could be that they can acclimate better than what we think they can, sort of thing, right? So it's feasible, right? So, but anyways, this was a bit of a shorter presentation this time there. Like I said, I'm just barely getting back into this each time. So hopefully it was a little bit clearer. Hopefully I haven't stumbled as much. But if you had a giant sort of thing inside you, no wonder your head would freeze sometimes and I couldn't remember the name of something, right? So anyways, if you have any sightings there, you can always contact me at cryptozoology sightings at protonmail.com. I haven't been able to check it recently there. I'm going to get my fishing videos together finally there when I get some bit more strength here and that sort of thing like that. And the next one would be about carp. So if you want to know about carp, like I said, I've been doing this since the 60s. The earliest sort of guy that you could find across the globe. I'm like the grandfather of professional carp fishing. Before Mr. Maddox appeared on the scene or any of these guys, I was already winning fishing contests here in the United States and Illinois, these separately to promote carp fishing and these kinds of things. So I started at the earliest sorts of things of this. And so I cover all the basics you'll need to be successful for carp fishing anywhere across the globe, and all kinds of things like that. And some different, we hunt for smaller carp, medium, and then we'll hunt for monsters and different presentations and kinds of things like that. So, but anyways, next ones there, I'm going to cover about some giant unknown lizards, some micro squatch little people, and some other sort of things like that. So this one wasn't one of my better ones there. Again, because I'm recovering and this sort of things like that, I'm a little bit weak here and there and that sort of thing like that. But I've certainly improved, and so thanks for the new subscribers there, and I hope you guys take care, and thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.